This is not a simple story, so buckle up. You're gonna want to hear this. Hello there, people of the internet. I'm your host, Mint, and welcome to today's case study. If you like what you see here, make sure to leave a like as we'll be covering more case studies in the upcoming future. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into today's case. Let's start with Travis Alexander. Okay? So, Travis was by all accounts the kind of guy you'd root for. You know the type charismatic, successful, someone you might see on a cover of a motivational book. He had this smile, the smile that would make you feel like you're the most important person in the room. Born into a troubled family, he fought his way out of poverty. And by his 20, he was a rising star at prepaid legal services. But before we continue, I really want to talk about Travis's childhood. It's important to understand what he came from, right? It wasn't easy, not by any stretch of imagination. Travis was born into a world of chaos. He grew up in a broken home filled with neglect, abuse, and instability. His parents were both drug addicts, and by the time Travis was 10, he had endured things no child should have ever experienced. Travis and his siblings were often left to fend for themselves. They were dirty, hungry, and scared. By the time Travis was a teenager, he had already seen more suffering than most people see in their lifetime. But instead of letting that hardship define him, Travis sought change. He was determined to break free from the cycle of poverty, addiction, and abuse that had surrounded him since birth. When Travis moved in with his grandparents as a teen, he found a stable home for the first time. His grandparents were devoted Mormons, and it was through them he was introduced to the faith that would soon come to define his life. You see, Travis was a devoted Mormon, and his religion wasn't just a part of his life. No, it defined it. He was saving himself for marriage. Or at least that's what he told most people. One of the core beliefs of Mormonism is the law of chastity. This means no intimate relationship before marriage. In the Mormon community, this is considered as one of the most sacred rules, and that's something Travis, as a devoted Mormon, was expected to follow. And for a while, it seemed like he was committed to living by those standards. You see, Travis grew up in a broken and difficult household. He found guidance in the Mormon faith. It gave him a structure, purpose, and a path to follow. But in 2006, when Travis met Jodi Arias at a company convention, everything changed. Their connection was instant, like sparks flying, and even though they lived states apart, they became somewhat inseparable, at least for a while. Now let's talk about Jodi. Jodi wasn't just beautiful, she was captivating. She was the kind of a woman who would draw you with just a look. But behind those big doe eyes, something darker lurked. Jodi grew up in California, in a seemingly normal family. But she didn't have the easiest childhood. There were whispers of abuse and neglect. She had dropped out of high school, drifted from job to job, and by her mid 20s, she was searching for something, or maybe someone, to fill the void in her life. And that's where Travis came in. At first, their relationship was pretty normal, the kind you see in the movies. They had traveled together, take cute photos, and appeared like a perfect couple. But behind closed doors, things were far from perfect. You see, Travis wanted Jodi, but on his terms. He loved the thrill of their secret affair, but felt guilty. Remember? He was a Mormon. Yet, with Jodi, he couldn't resist. She had this hold on him, and Travis found himself torn between his faith and his desires. And Jodi, well, Jodi didn't want passion, she wanted commitment, and Travis wasn't ready for that. As the relationship became more intense, it also became more unstable. Travis would later break things off with Jodi, but Jodi would always find her way back in. The relationship had been a roller coaster of passion, guilt, and control. But by this time, Travis was seeing the writing on the wall. He knew that being with Jodi wasn't just bad for his emotional well being, it was damaging his spiritual life, his reputation, and his future. Jodi wasn't someone who would simply accept a breakup. She had invested too much of herself into Travis, becoming consumed by her obsession with him. So when Travis started pulling away, it wasn't just the end of relationship for Jodi. It was the end of everything she had built her life around. When Travis tried to pull away from Jodi, Jodi became more obsessive. She moved to Mesa, Arizona to be closer to him. And even after they had already broken up, she continued to call, email, and text him constantly. And it wasn't just casual communication. Jodi's messages were filled with emotional manipulation, varying from desperate pleas to angry outbursts. This was messed up, but Jodi even hacked into the social media accounts, read his private messages, and stalked him when he went on dates with other women. Travis' friends would later say that Jodi was like a shadow, always lurking in the background, refusing to let him go. And despite his attempts to move on, Jodi was always there. Jodi would show up at Travis's house unannounced, let herself in, and sometimes even hide in closets, waiting to catch him with another woman. But here's the thing, obsession doesn't thrive on access, it feeds on control. Jodi needed to control Travis, his feeling, his actions, and when she felt that control slipping, her behavior became more and more extreme. We're gonna fast forward to 2008. By now, Travis and Jodi had already broken up for good. Or so he thought. Travis was planning a trip to Cancun with another woman, and life seemed to be looking up. But on June 4th, everything changed. That day, Jodi drove over 1,000 miles from her home in California to Travis's house in Arizona. She claims she just wanted to talk and maybe rekindle what they had. This wasn't the first time she had shown up unannounced, and Travis, despite his better judgment, let her into his home. In the hours leading up to the horrific event, it might have seemed like things were normal, or as normal as they could be between Jodi and Travis. They spend the day together, talking, and at some point, they even end up in bed. I want to give a quick warning before we continue, as we'll be discussing about the attack. If you don't feel like you want to hear about it, you can skip right ahead. Make sure that you guys are doing okay, you guys are doing well, and you're in a safe environment. It all started in the shower. According to investigators, Travis was taking a shower when Jodi, who had been quietly observing, snapped. She had a knife hidden, and while Travis was vulnerable, she attacked him with brutal force. Imagine the terror, the confusion Travis must have felt in those moments. One second he was going about his routine, the next he was being viciously attacked by the woman he had tried so hard to break free from. His throat was slashed as he tried to escape. He was stabbed over and over again, 27 times in total. But Jodi didn't stop there. She had brought a gun with her, and after the brutal stabbing, she shot Travis in the head, as if it to make sure that he would never get up again. This wasn't just a murder anymore. This was an overkill. The next morning, Travis had missed a business meeting. His friends grew worried. Days passed and still nothing. So on June 9th, 2008, they went to his house, broke in, and discovered a horrific scene. The police were called and immediately suspected Jodi. Now, here's where things get really bizarre. When police brought Jodi in for questioning, she denied everything. She said something along the lines like, "I wasn't there." She also said that she hasn't seen Travis in months. But the investigators weren't buying it. Why? Because they had found a camera. You know, they say that sometimes smallest things bring the biggest revelations. And in this case, the detail came in a form of a camera. This was Travis's own digital camera. The one that would turn out to be the most silent yet damning witnesses of them all. So, let's take a closer look at how simple camera cracked open the entire case. When investigators arrived at the scene, they were faced with brutal, chaotic mess. Blood everywhere, a lifeless body in the shower, and the signs of vicious struggle. But amid the horror, there was something else. Something seemingly out of place. Tossed in the washing machine along with some clothes and a few towels was a digital camera. It was really clear that someone had tried to wash the evidence. But digital technology has a way of perceiving secrets, even when you try to bury them. The camera had been used the very day of Travis's murder. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Investigators were able to recover the deleted photos from the memory card, and what they found, it was a timeline, an eerie, haunting record of events leading up to and during the murder. The photos started off innocently enough. At around 5 p.m., there were images of Travis in the shower, smiling, unaware that these would be the last photos ever taken of him alive. These images are chilling in retrospect, knowing what was about to happen. The camera had captured more than just shower photos. As investigators scrolled through the recovered images, they came across a blurry, seemingly accidental shot. This photo had been taken in the middle of murder. In this grainy image, you could see a glimpse of Travis's body on the bathroom floor, covered in blood. And nearby, there was something else. A foot. Jodi's foot. But let's get back to Jodi's story, right? She told the investigators that two intruders had broken into Travis's home and killed him. She said she had barely escaped with her life. Sounds crazy, right? When the story didn't work, Jodi came with another one. Jodi Arias has told two completely different stories. First, she claimed she wasn't there, and then she said the masked intruders did it. But when both of these stories fell apart, she said it was self-defense. But here's a question for you. How does someone stab another person 27 times, shoot them, and slit their throat, and then claim it was self-defense? After hearing this, Travis's friends and family were horrified by this claim. They described Travis as a kind and gentle, someone who would never raise his hands in anger. And yet Jodi had painted a completely different picture. The thing is, Jodi's story doesn't even end there. She went into gruesome details on the stand, describing an abusive relationship that had left her terrified for her life. According to her, Travis was manipulative and controlling, and sexually aggressive, forcing her into situations she didn't want to be in. The jury were glued to their seats, the media eating it up. The trial wasn't just about murder anymore, it had become a speculate. And Jodi, she was right at the center, spinning her web of lies. Jodi Arias' trial wasn't just any trial, it was a media circus. You had news outlets covering every second, social media blowing up with debates, and Jodi herself, well, she was loving the attention. Jodi took the stands for 18 days. 18 days of testifying in excruciating detail, talking about everything, from her childhood to her relationship with Travis, and of course, the day she killed him. And throughout it all, she maintained this calm, most detached manner. It was as if none of that was her fault. And that's where it got even more twisted. Because as Jodi was testifying, photos of her smiling, posing for the cameras, and even doing handstand in the interrogations room were shown to the jury. It painted a picture of someone who wasn't just innocent, but someone who was manipulated. The prosecution, led by fiery Juan Martinez, wasn't buying into her story. He ripped into her on stand, calling out on her lies, inconsistentness, and manipulative behavior. He pointed to the overwhelming evidence, Travis's injuries, the deleted photos, Jodi's changing stories, and asked the jury to see her for what she was. After months of testimony, the case was finally in the hands of the jury. And let me tell you, this was one of the most highly anticipated verdicts in recent memory. On May 8, 2013, the jury returned their final verdict. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Travis's family sobbed with relief. Jodi, well, she barely flinched. In interviews afterwards, she claimed she would rather get the death penalty than spend the rest of her life in prison. The jury was deadlocked to the death penalty, so she was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So where's Jodi Arias now? Well, she's currently serving her life sentence at the Arizona State Prison Complex. And believe it or not, even behind bars, she hasn't stayed out of spotlight. She's given interviews, painted pictures that she sells online, and continues to maintain her innocence. It's like the media's attention she craved hasn't gone away, even after all this time. But for the family and friends of Travis Alexander, the pain of his loss hasn't gone away either. They remember him as a loving, kind man who had his whole life ahead of him, until Jodi Arias took it away. The Jodi Arias case is one of those stories that sticks with you, not just because of the brutality of the crime, but because of the person behind it. Jodi wasn't a typical killer. She didn't fit the mold. She was beautiful, intelligent, and could play the victim like a pro. But behind that mask was something darker, an obsession that drove her to murder. And that's the part that chills me the most. How someone can hide behind a facade so well that by the time you see the real person, it's already too late. What do you think? Was Jodi Arias a master manipulator who finally got caught, or was she truly a victim, pushed to her breaking point? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And with that, I've been your host, Mint. If I said anything offensive during the video, I truly apologize. If you like true crime cases, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, as we'll be covering more in the upcoming future, as I've mentioned. Till then, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.